Here's the situation.
It's a regular Monday morning. You're sipping your coffee in Barcelona, maybe stuck in traffic in Lisbon, or, God help you, trying to get through airport security in Paris. Then, bam!
They didn't pay the electric bill.
Everything goes dark. Lights out, phones dead, planes grounded, metros frozen underground. Welcome to April 28th, 2025, aka the day Europe forgot to pay its electric bill. Around 10:30 a.m., an absolutely enormous blackout slammed into southwestern Europe, hitting Spain, Portugal, southern France, and Andorra all at once. We're talking millions of people suddenly thrown back into the Middle Ages, minus the plagues, for now. And when I say everything shut down, I mean everything. Airports, dark, hospitals, backup generators struggling, internet,
Forget it.
banks, forget your money. Coffee shops, closed. Now this is how you start a revolution. Spain, who took the worst hit, declared a full national emergency. 30,000 police officers were deployed to keep order, which you know is kind of tricky when the traffic lights don't work and nobody can use their radios. Meanwhile in Portugal, emergency services literally couldn't answer calls because their systems were down. Imagine calling 911 and getting voicemail. Sorry, Europe is currently unavailable. Please try again later. Now at first, everyone thought this had to be a cyber attack. Russians, hackers, aliens, solar flares. Twitter was naturally on fire, or it would have been if anyone had Wi-Fi. But turns out, nope, authorities quickly ruled out hacking or sabotage. The real cause? Officially, at the time of writing, I mean a good old-fashioned screw-up somewhere deep in Europe's ridiculously complicated power grid. Specifically, officials hinted it might have started with grid instability, meaning one line goes down and a domino effect slaps half the continent in the face. Think Jenga, but instead of wooden blocks, it's civilization. Luckily, after about 6 chaotic hours, power crews managed to patch things up. Lights flickered back, flights resumed, and millions of Europeans blinked, stretched, and rejoined the 21st century, only slightly more traumatized than usual. So what did we learn? The modern world is stupidly fragile. Your phone battery will betray you. And yes, it's probably a good idea to keep cash, water, and maybe a crossbow handy. Now that we've covered the freshest and quite scary news on the list, let's continue with a lighter topic. War. If you thought the war in Ukraine was cooling off like a bad Tinder date, it ain't. This month saw missiles, lies, diplomacy, and the cringiest thing of all, war crimes. Russia kicked off what they're calling a spring offensive. They pumped tens of thousands of troops into areas like Sumy, Kharkiv, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia. Ukrainian officials counted over 180 combat clashes per day, up from the usual 140. Oh, and in Donetsk, Ukrainian forces reportedly captured Chinese nationals fighting for Russia. China hasn't confirmed it, obviously, and as usual, it's smart to take Ukrainian reporting with a grain of salt as well. Hopefully, we'll get a clearer picture next month. Russia proposed a 3-day ceasefire around Victory Day in May. For context, Victory Day in Russia, celebrated on May 9th, marks the anniversary of the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. Interesting choice of date to propose a ceasefire for sure. Ukraine's response? Yeah, how about 30 days instead? Russia's response to that? LOL no. I'll let you be the judge of either side in this exchange. Anyway, so once again, peace talks go the same way as Wagner troops, into the shredder. Talking of things going wrong, time to put jokes aside for a minute. Civilian casualties have been catastrophic this month. April 4th, Kryvyi Rih. Russia blew up a residential area. 20 dead, including 9 kids. It was the deadliest single attack on children since the war began. April 13th, Sumy. A Palm Sunday service was hit with missiles. 36 dead, 119 injured. Ukrainian officials condemned the strike as a deliberate targeting of civilians on a significant religious holiday. Russia claimed the strike targeted a gathering of Ukrainian military officers, asserting it was a legitimate military objective. However, the high civilian toll and the timing during a religious observance have led to widespread international condemnation, with many labeling the attack a war crime. This is another case of where one side of the aisle conveniently leaves out the fact that there were legitimate military targets involved, while the other forgets to mention the civilian casualties. This incident underscores the complexities and tragedies of warfare, where military targets are often in close proximity to civilian areas, leading to devastating consequences. April 24th, Kyiv. A missile struck the capital, killing 13 people and injuring over 90. The missile? A North Korean KN-23. Thanks, Kim. April 29th, Kharkiv and Dnipro. Russian drones injured 46 people, including kids and a pregnant woman. Maybe time to stop this war, guys? In the US, someone had the bright idea to pitch a peace deal. The proposal? Freeze the front lines, let Russia keep Crimea, and, oh yeah, Ukraine should just forget about joining NATO. President Zelensky's response was basically, LOL no. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign minister demanded Ukraine give up 20% of its territory, including Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, and disarm. Meanwhile, Europe is trying to muster 25,000 troops for a peacekeeping mission. So far, the UK and France are on board, but everyone else is like, yeah, nah, leave me alone. Even Australia said they're down to help, except the tanks they promised are stuck in bureaucracy, waiting on the US to greenlight them. Classic. So, in summary, Russia's doubling down, Ukraine's holding the line, and the rest of the world can't get a consensus about the whole thing. One side sees the other as war hawks in the pockets of the military-industrial complex, and the other side says anyone that wants the killing to stop is on Putin's payroll. Since a peace, as things stand, inevitably will come with Ukrainian lands lost to Russia. That's the current reality of the situation. To sum it up, we've got dead civilians, foreign fighters, rejected ceasefires, and missile attacks from North Korea, all in 30 days. The situation in Gaza is not better either. In early April, Israel launched a ground offensive into the Shuja'iyya neighborhood of Gaza City, marking the third such incursion during the ongoing conflict. The operation aimed to dismantle Hamas's military infrastructure, but resulted in significant civilian casualties. Big surprise there. On April 9th, an Israeli airstrike targeted a residential building in Shuja'iyya, killing at least 35 Palestinians and injuring over 70. Israel claimed the building housed a Hamas command center, a justification that has drawn international scrutiny. Simultaneously, the Israeli Defense Forces expanded operations in Rafah, establishing the Morag Corridor. This strategic move effectively bisected the Gaza Strip, isolating Rafah from the central regions. The corridor's creation has led to increased displacement and restricted movement for civilians. The humanitarian situation in Gaza has deteriorated sharply. Since early March, Israel has enforced a blockade, halting imports of food, medicine, and fuel. Community kitchens, once numbering 170, have dwindled to around 70 to 80 and face imminent shutdowns due to supply shortages. Aid organizations report that over 10,000 children are affected by malnutrition, with at least 52 deaths attributed to hunger, including 50 children. The World Food Program has depleted its stocks, and food prices have surged by 1,400% since the ceasefire's collapse. The blockade, intended to pressure Hamas into releasing hostages, has drawn criticism for its impact on civilians. Ceasefire talks mediated by Egypt and Qatar have stalled. Hamas has expressed openness to a long-term truce, but refuses to disarm. The impasse has prolonged the conflict, worsening the humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, the hostage situation remains dire. Families of 35 deceased hostages fear that deteriorating conditions in Gaza may render their loved ones' bodies unidentifiable. Currently, 59 hostages remain in Gaza, with only 24 believed to be alive. Internationally, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency has accused Israel of abusing over 50 of its staff during military detention, including allegations of beatings and use as human shields. Israel denies systemic abuse but has investigated individual cases. Spain has appealed to the International Court of Justice to compel Israel to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza, arguing that Israel, as an occupying power, has an obligation to meet the basic needs of the population. Long story short, the situation in Gaza remains bleak. Military operations continue, humanitarian conditions worsen, and diplomatic efforts have yet to yield tangible results. In another similarly friendly area of the world, a nuclear rocket measuring contest just started again. On April 22nd, in the quiet, scenic town of Pahalgam, a tourist haven in Indian-administered Kashmir, a group of masked gunmen opened fire on buses and hotels, killing 26 people, 25 of them tourists. Claiming responsibility, a group called the Resistance Front, a name that sounds like a sci-fi rebellion but is actually a proxy group with links to Lashkar-e-Taiba, a Pakistani-based terror group. India, of course, wasn't having it. Government officials immediately blamed Pakistan because, frankly, they've got history. Pakistan, you never would have guessed it, denied everything. We condemn the attack, they said, with all the sincerity of a cat knocking over your coffee mug. The Indian public's reaction? Unfiltered rage. Social media exploded. TV anchors screamed into their cameras, and hashtags like Punish Pakistan trended within minutes. India's Prime Minister gave a televised speech full of fire and fury, promising retaliation, quoting ancient texts and nearly combusting from righteous anger. Within 24 hours, the line of control, that lovely, not quite a border that separates the two nuclear-armed countries, lit up like a fireworks show run by lunatics. Both sides accused the other of opening fire first, and cross-border shelling resumed in sectors like Uri, Punch, and Rajouri. Mortar rounds rained down on villages, soldiers exchanged gunfire, and drones buzzed through the sky just like in Ukraine. 2 Pakistani drones were reportedly shot down by Indian air defense units, while Pakistan claimed it had repelled multiple Indian incursions. The truth? Somewhere between propaganda and pixelated satellite images. For the civilians in the area, it was another episode of Will My House Still Exist Tomorrow? India wasn't done yet. They reached for an old, rusty, but still sharp weapon, the Indus Waters Treaty, a 64-year-old agreement that governs how rivers flow between India and Pakistan. On April 26th, India suspended the treaty, basically saying, enjoy the drought. Pakistan called it a blatant act of war, which, to be fair, is a step above saying, hey, that's not very neighborly. Analysts called it a dangerous escalation. Farmers in both countries called it, I guess I'll die. Then came the diplomatic divorce. India revoked visas for Pakistani citizens. Pakistan suspended all trade with India. Both sides closed border crossings faster than you can say,
hello, how are you? I am under the water. Please help me.
Oh, and Pakistan closed its airspace to Indian commercial airlines, because nothing de-escalates terrorism like making it harder to get to Islamabad for a business conference. And then, things got real. On April 29th, Pakistan's Minister of Information dropped a giant diplomatic bombshell. We have intelligence that India may launch a military strike within the next 24 to 36 hours. That's not subtle. That's not vague. That's countdown to war-level stuff. India didn't confirm it, but they didn't deny it either. They just held emergency security briefings, mobilized more troops, and whispered, we're not saying we're gonna hit you, but keep looking up. Following the Pahalgam attack, Indian forces launched widespread crackdowns in the region. Dozens were arrested, entire neighborhoods were locked down, and homes of suspected militants were bulldozed like a scene from the quiet little American town of Granby, where nothing happened on June 4th, 2004. Let's recap why this whole situation was cursed to repeat itself. India and Pakistan have fought 3 wars over Kashmir. Both claim it, both occupy parts of it, and neither is willing to let the other one have it without a fight. Every time a terror attack happens, the two governments go full Cold War, blame each other, and raise the nuclear tension just high enough to get the world's attention before backing down again. It's like a toxic relationship, but with artillery and international condemnations. As of the end of April, the situation remains dangerously fragile. Border skirmishes continue, airspace is tense, and the people who live in these zones are just hoping May doesn't bring something worse. The international community, as usual, is urging restraint, which is code for, please don't do anything that forces us to cancel summer vacation. Speaking of vacations, the Pope took a permanent one, moved all the way to the VIP lounge upstairs. In April, the world said goodbye to one of the most fascinating and unconventional popes in modern history. Let's take a moment to talk about the man himself, because Francis wasn't your typical pontiff. Before joining the priesthood, he was actually going to get married. He even had a high school sweetheart, but he changed course and became a priest. To this day, this is considered one of the most outrageous crash-outs over a girl. In his youth, he worked as a nightclub bouncer. Imagine that. You're trying to get into a bar in 1970s Buenos Aires, and future Pope Francis is the one telling you to take a hike. Thou shalt not enter wearing flip-flops. After getting tired of whooping drunk teenagers, he studied chemistry. He actually had a degree in chemical technology. So, yeah, he could preach, but he could also probably explain Jesse Pinkman how to cook crystal meth. Unlike some of his predecessors, Pope Francis chose humility from the beginning. He refused the fancy papal apartments. He took the bus. He washed prisoners' feet. He was, by all accounts, a people's pope, and he wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers, even inside the church. He once said, "Who am I to judge?" when asked about gay priests, an answer that made some conservatives very uncomfortable and made others think, wait, did the Pope just sound kinda chill? Straight chilling, however, won't save you from aging. God should really patch that when Earth 2 gets released. Francis had been in declining health in recent years, battling respiratory issues and undergoing surgery for intestinal problems. Still, he continued to lead, speak, and shake things up right to the end. Whether you loved him, criticized him, or just knew him as the cool Pope, there's no denying that Francis left a mark. He was the Pope who tweeted blessings, hugged street children, called out the arms industry, and once casually told a crowd of young people, "Make a mess." Well, Your Holiness, Mission accomplished. Talking about a mess. April in the United States went wild. The economy's doing somersaults, protests everywhere, and billionaires might actually be running the government. Not sure why that's news all of a sudden, but let's not get bogged down in pesky little details. Let's unpack the mess, or masterpiece, depending on your cable news preference. First up, the US-China trade war. New tariffs dropped like mixtapes. President Trump, in a move economists are calling bold, and retailers are calling bankruptcy fuel, slapped a 10% tariff on all imports. Chinese goods? Some are facing up to 145%. In response, the US economy shrank by 0.3% this quarter, which might not sound like much, unless you're a small business owner, a stockholder, or just someone who likes buying stuff. Amazon and Walmart are juggling price hikes, while dollar stores are considering just calling themselves $5 stores. Trump's response? He said kids may have to settle for $2 instead of $30. Truly a brave stand against the tyranny of abundance. China's manufacturing index slipped below 50, a signal that factories are slowing down, possibly because no one wants to pay $600 for an iPad made of spite. They also rolled out a list of US goods exempt from their own tariffs. You know, just in case the US still wants to sell them insulin or aircraft engines. While the economy burns, people are hitting the streets. Not with pitchforks, but with posters, slogans that rhyme, and lots of strong opinions. On the 5th of April, over 1,400 coordinated protests broke out across all 50 states. Think Coachella, but with people shouting about democracy and rich people. Anywhere from 3 to 5 million people turned out, which, in protest math, translates to a lot. So what are they really mad about? Deep cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits, aggressive deportations and immigration raids, rollbacks on LGBTQ+ rights, widespread government layoffs, and of course the trade war. On the 19th of April, protesters returned under the slogan "No Kings." You had signs reading "Down with digital monarchs" and "Stop the billionaire binge." Meanwhile, a bunch of diplomats are getting pink slips because they don't align with the new vision. Rubio cited bureaucracy and excess liberalism as reasons. And in a subplot straight out of a bad Netflix political drama, Trump has been publicly beefing with the Supreme Court. Why? The court blocked several fast-track immigration and surveillance measures. Trump called them traitors to security. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has overseen a full audit of every federal agency. Doge claims large savings, $160 billion to be exact. These savings were attributed to measures such as canceling redundant contracts, eliminating underutilized programs, and reducing expenditures on certain grants and aid programs. The department announced the termination of numerous federal contracts, including those related to DEI initiatives, as well as environmental compliance services. Doge identified and terminated leases for underutilized federal office spaces. An example includes the cancellation of a lease for a USDA office in Topeka, Kansas, which had reportedly been unoccupied for 3 years, resulting in claimed savings of $964,396. The department initiated efforts to modernize data storage by transitioning from magnetic tape archives to digital backups. While Doge claims large savings, critics question the long-term impacts and accuracy of the numbers. To summarize the divide in the United States this month, the left portrays the tariffs as reckless and economically self-destructive. They argue that the trade war is hurting American consumers and small businesses the most, leading to higher prices, supply chain issues, and a shrinking economy, all while failing to meaningfully hurt China. The right presents the trade war as a long overdue correction to China's unfair trade practices. They claim the tariffs are a tough but necessary stance to bring jobs back to the US, protect national security, and assert American economic independence. The left frames the hands-off protests as a legitimate mass movement defending democracy, civil rights, and economic fairness. They highlight grassroots unity against perceived authoritarianism, billionaire overreach, and social safety net cuts. The right often characterizes the protests as overblown or orchestrated by partisan interest groups. They argue the demonstrators are exaggerating threats or resisting needed reforms, especially when it comes to government efficiency or immigration enforcement. Our goal is not to tell you what to believe. We know you have the brains to form your own ideas about such complicated issues as well. We want to be different from other news sources that do little more than spew the propaganda of this side or that side. Drop a like and subscribe if you support this kind of news. Now, before we all go mad, let's break up the politics with some tech and science news. SpaceX kicked off April by saying, Let's fly over the poles because why not? The Fram-2 mission launched March 31st and returned April 4th after flying in a polar orbit. That's never been done before. The private crew, featuring a Norwegian explorer, a German pilot, and a crypto millionaire, spent 4 days doing 22 science experiments in orbit, like studying how blood behaves in space. This was also the first splashdown on the West Coast in nearly a decade. So, SpaceX can now say they've landed rockets on barges, deserts, oceans, and your mom's backyard. Not to be outdone, China launched 3 astronauts aboard the Shenzhou 20 to their Tiangong space station. Smooth launch, smooth docking, all went fine. While SpaceX was doing donuts over the poles, China quietly reminded everyone that they have their own space house, and it's fully stocked. They're running experiments, growing plants, and probably laughing at the US trying to reboot Artemis for the 5th time. In the possibly not alone department, NASA's James Webb Telescope turned its eye to exoplanet K218b and found dimethyl sulfide in the atmosphere. This is a compound that, on Earth, is only emitted by plankton. So either there's alien seafood or a yet unknown chemical process going on that planet. Scientists are hyped but cautious. Still, this is the best lead yet in the ongoing
Where the fuck is everyone?
quest. In the UK, a woman named Grace Davidson made history by giving birth using her sister's donated womb. No, that's not a metaphor. She literally had a uterus installed like a human hardware update. This is the UK's first successful womb transplant resulting in childbirth, and it's a massive leap for reproductive science. It gives hope to women born without a womb, or those who lost it due to illness. Meanwhile, Colossal Biosciences announced it has cloned 3 direwolf pups. Actual prehistoric murder puppies. Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi are engineered to look like direwolves but technically aren't 100% DNA matches. There's a hot debate about whether or not these are actual direwolves. The team argues that if it looks like a direwolf, walks like a direwolf, and barks like a direwolf, then it's a direwolf. Let's just hope they've seen Jurassic Park and taken notes about what not to do when it comes to containment. In ocean horror news, scientists recorded the first footage of a juvenile colossal squid near Antarctica. This slippery nightmare was gliding around 1,000 meters deep, making eye contact with the camera, looking at us like we owe him money. Researchers are ecstatic. Everyone else now fears the sea again. Now that we have established a new reason to stay away from water, let's look over to the Congo, where people didn't have that luxury. In early April, the Njili River said, "You want some waterfront property? Cool," and casually flooded multiple districts. At least 33 people died, roads vanished underwater, homes collapsed, and the government scrambled to offer aid after most people already needed boats instead of beds. This is now a recurring thing. Kinshasa's floodplain wasn't designed to handle decades of unchecked urban growth and collapsing drainage systems. Translation: it'll probably happen again. Meanwhile, Istanbul had a really bad day. On April 23rd, a 6.2 magnitude earthquake hit the Sea of Marmara, followed by over 100 aftershocks. Buildings cracked, people panicked, and more than 350 people ended up in the hospital. Not from falling debris, mind you, but from panic jumping out of windows. Because apparently earthquakes are terrifying enough to make you forget this game has fall damage. Let's hop across the Atlantic where the US had its own meteorological meltdown. Between April 2nd and 7th, the South and Midwest were battered by tornadoes. 156 confirmed tornadoes touched down. Kentucky, in particular, got absolutely rinsed, up to 15 inches of rain in some spots, flash floods everywhere, and the Kentucky River in Frankfurt reaching levels not seen since the last time Noah built something. At least 24 people died, dozens more were injured, and entire communities were left submerged or splintered. While America was underwater, South Korea was on fire, and not metaphorically for once. The country just lived through one of its worst wildfire seasons ever. By early April, more than 104,000 hectares had been scorched, and 32 people had died. That's a landscape the size of a small country turned to ash. A study claimed to confirm it was caused by climate change, that rising temperatures and drier conditions made the fires at least twice as likely and 15% more intense. Also, wind. Lots of wind. Because if the world's going to burn, it might as well spread fast, right? Whole towns were evacuated, forests obliterated, and air quality tanked worse than crypto in 2022. If fires wasn't enough, in April 2025, South Korea experienced significant political turmoil. President Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office following a unanimous constitutional court decision upholding his impeachment over the unauthorized imposition of martial law in December 2024. Yoon now faces criminal charges, including abuse of power and insurrection. In Argentina, President Javier Milei's administration secured a $20 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, aiming to stabilize Argentina's economy through austerity measures and deregulation. However, these policies have led to widespread protests and a general strike organized by the country's main union confederation, CGT, reflecting public discontent over rising inflation and reduced public spending. In France, Marine Le Pen, leader of the right-wing National Rally Party, was convicted on March 31st for misappropriating European Union funds, resulting in a 4-year prison sentence and a 5-year ban from holding public office. This came after Marine Le Pen's party achieved significant gains in recent French elections. In the first round of the snap parliamentary elections, held on June 30, 2024, the RN secured approximately 32% of the vote, nearly double that of President Emmanuel Macron's centrist Renaissance Party, which garnered about 15%. For this reason, many see this as a political witch hunt. Yemen remains a focal point of geopolitical tensions. In April, the United States and the United Kingdom intensified their military campaign against Houthi rebels. On April 29th, joint airstrikes targeted drone manufacturing facilities near Sana'a. However, these operations have raised concerns about civilian casualties. Notably, a U.S. airstrike on a detention center in Sana'a resulted in the deaths of at least 68 African migrants. And that wraps up April. War, protests, billionaires playing SimCity with real governments, and the economy doing its best impression of a dying Roomba. If you made it this far without throwing your phone, congrats, your brain might not be fully rotted yet. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss next month's installment of What Fresh Hell Is This? This is brain rot news, because someone has to meme the end times.